promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Are We Idiots Show. I'm your host, Mark Weaver, with my co-host, Richard Kroll, as always.
Mark Weaver, great to see you. Listen, we survived 4 nor'easter blizzards in the month of March, and that old saying is very true. In like a penguin, out like a polar bear, or in like a lion, out like a tiger. Whatever it is, that's happening.
I thought you were going to use the Snowmageddon reference again. I've done that in the past.
Please don't.
But it's we're taping on a Friday today. It's a little bit different, but looking forward to an interesting and entertaining show. This is our 6th episode already, Kroll.
Wow, we're getting old.
But let's briefly review, before we start this week's show, let's briefly review the first 5 episodes, because if you're just joining us and you haven't listened before, welcome, for one. But we've had 5 episodes prior to this, and I think they were pretty darn good. The first one was on free speech, and that was a lively debate with Rich and I. Then we talked about guns in America.
That was livelier.
And a lot of the listeners hated both of us.
Way more you, by the way.
That's true. They were, of course, your friends emailing you about that. Then we talked about the role of the military, and I schooled Rich on the proper U.S.
We agreed most of the time. How did you school me?
Well, I led you down the road.
Thanks for your help.
Then we talked about the immediate gratification nation.
IGN.
We've coined that phrase. We've actually trademarked it. And that was more about how we're in debt as a nation and as families in America. And then last week we talked about the federal government and some of its ills. So I threw out a few episodes ago what I called the 5-episode challenge. And Rich kind of laughed at me about that. But I say if you go out and pick up 5 of our episodes, doesn't matter which 5, and this can be at any point in the future too, listen to 5, you'll be hooked for life. So that's my guarantee for you on this I'm
episode. Hooked to you for life.
As far as this week, we have the Idiot of the Week, like we do each week. Rich is going to give me some nominees here in a moment. Then we're going to talk about obesity in America. And we always tackle difficult subjects. Obesity is a difficult subject. We're going to talk about it. And then we're going to conclude the show with When We Were Idiots. And Rich is going to tell one of his infamous stories. So, sound like a good plan, Richard?
Great plan, Mark.
Okay.
What's with the Richard, the formal Richard, by the way?
I don't know. Maybe
I feel like I'm being reprimanded by my dad.
Maybe it's because we're taping on a Friday for
Got
once.
it. Got it.
Know. But so, Idiot of the Week. There's lots of nominees. I have one in my mind from last night, but you probably won't bring that one up.
I might. These two are actually fresh off the press from yesterday and one from last night.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can sense it.
Well, we're sports fans, so this one's sports related. Last night,
yes, I know where you're going.
Kansas State
I know where you're
upset
going.
Kentucky, earning an Elite 8 appearance. And Kansas State had been 0-9 in their history against Kentucky. They finally won a close game, and the players went nuts after the game celebrating. And wouldn't you know it, the Kentucky players and coach John Calipari, Coach Cal, immediately exited to the locker room without extending any post-game handshakes to the victors. So the Kansas State players were pretty ticked off, and they felt they were disrespected, especially after a historical victory. Calipari, Coach Cal, later denied any intentional attempt to snub Kansas State, and he said, "Hey, they had their backs turned to us and were celebrating. So I walked off. There was no disrespect for anything. It's just that they were celebrating, and I was happy for them. My team's not like that. They beat us. They deserved to win."
Yeah, sure. He was happy for them. Is it possible that we could have a preemptive winner without even having the second nominee?
One and done?
Calipari's probably heading back to the locker room to hire a lawyer because you're going to get put on NCAA probation for the 3rd time in his career. I can't stand that loser. But okay, I'll listen to the second nominee.
He's a winner as a coach. He might be a loser as a humanitarian. But listen, I knew that would be such a a fervent winner out of the gate that I had to come with a very competitive second
Okay,
candidate.
I'm willing to listen.
This one is just as good, my friend. Hot off the presses.
Okay.
Kellyanne Conway, counselor to your favorite president, Donald Trump, and who's also tasked with combating the opioid epidemic, which is a big problem, as we all know, told college students to indulge in junk food as an alternative to buying drugs. Conway addressed the crowd at the Generation Next Forum, and she said, I quote, "On our college campuses, your folks are reading the labels. They won't put any sugar in their body. They don't eat carbs anymore, and they're very, very fastidious about what goes into their body. And then you buy a street drug for $5 or $10, and it's laced with fentanyl, and that's it. So I guess my short advice is, as somebody double your age, eat the ice cream, have the French fry, don't buy the street drug. Believe me, it all works out."
So she's portraying it as a binary choice. It's only one or the other. I mean,
Well, no, basically she's saying, hey, sorry folks, if you have a deep chemical addiction that's controlling your brain, just stop for a minute and drive over to your local Mickey D's and you'll be fine.
I don't even know where to go with that. But since we're talking about obesity this week, maybe I should pick that. But Calipari is just, and of course, you and I have a basketball background, so maybe we have some bias when it comes to nominees related to basketball. I know earlier in the show we had Steve Kerr, but you're asking me to make a judgment.
That's a tough one. That's actually a tough one.
Yeah, because I'm no Kellyanne fan, and we're going to be talking about obesity, and anyone who advocates eating a lot of junk food, I don't agree with. But
Can we have a tie? Can we actually give 50 cents to each?
No, there's no one that can beat John Calipari. Potentially, well, I won't go there. I had another coach that I don't like, but Calipari has got to be the idiot of the week. I nominate him, or I choose him.
I was kind of hoping to give 50 cents to each of their charities instead of $1 to the winner, but I'll go with Coach Cal.
Okay, I'm sending the dollar check this week, I think.
Yes, it's your
my
turn.
turn. Okay, so Idiot of the Week is over, and we move on to obesity in America. And Kroller, as I was thinking about this topic this week, and let me just preface, I always say preface, that we know it's a difficult subject, and maybe we might be offensive to some people by some of our straight talk, but it's coming from love. That's all we can say.
You're all about love.
But I really think that I see the obesity problem in a similar, I guess it's a similar analogy to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago with the savings problem in America. And there's likely several contributing factors to people that are obese or overweight. You mentioned with the savings problem, procrastination and or discipline. But my take is that it's largely a result of people's ignorance about nutrition. And there are certainly other factors, but I think the largest contributor to our problem is that most people don't know how to eat. And we can talk about the vested interests that keep people in ignorance when it comes to nutrition. And a lot of them have a financial interest to do so. But that's my main premise. Before I go any further and quote a few stats, do you vehemently disagree?
Now we're going to disagree again, and this is where it gets fun. Listen, I can give you a statistic right off the top of my head that says there's no significant relationship between obesity and education among men. Among women, however, there's a trend. Those with college degrees are less likely to have obesity compared with less educated women. So
yeah, but you're talking about degrees. That's not talking about being educated in.
There's way more other important factors into the obesity problem.
I have a good degree. I didn't take one nutrition class.
You're not that smart. I could have got your degree. I mean, just listen, and we won't even get into that. But I think there's
I think that's an irrelevant stat you gave. Can I just put that on the record?
What's irrelevant?
Education level and obesity, they're not linked. I understand, but that's not my point.
Would you give me a chance to finish, Mr. Interrupter?
My point is educated about nutrition.
I just
not
was
educated
trying
as
to slow
degrees.
I was trying to slow your roll down.
You did so.
There are much bigger variables and factors that are contributing to obesity, including fast food, which wasn't prevalent in the 50s. Mickey D's and Burger King and everybody came out, and as our society became a faster society, in a hurry, looking for convenience, fast food is terrible for you, loaded with fat and sugar and everything else. We have bigger portions. Americans are eating way more than they used to. In fact, the USDA reports that the average American ate almost 20% more calories in 2000 than they did in 83. And today, each American puts away an average of 195 pounds of meat every year compared to 138 in 1950. So we're eating a lot more. I do agree there's heavy confusion over diet versus nutrition, and that's a factor, but also we're way more inactive than most industrialized countries. And there's reasons for that, right? We used to work in fields. We used to work in factories. We used to walk to work. We're lazy slobs, in cars and trains, and they said 80% of Americans are working out less or not getting enough exercise, and that every other industrialized country is getting way more exercise. So the point is, yes, your premise is correct, but it's one factor, and it's not even the main factor.
It's absolutely the main factor, and I'll tell you why. And it's not everyone's fault, right? I mean, again, I'm a libertarian, and I think I said this before. At the end of the day, if you're born with certain cultural disadvantages or family dynamics, or you have to take medicine, you may be more predisposed to be obese. But at the end of the day, it's your job to figure it out, kind of like the whole savings issue, right? So I fully acknowledge that it's not a straight line, this problem. But there's been so many factors that have been influencing us with regard to poor eating habits. And some of them you already mentioned, the marketing around fast food and sugary and fatty beverages and foods. There's certainly, that's where the money is, so that's where we get marketed by. But the USDA, you brought them up. Their food pyramid that's been around for 100 years.
A scam.
It's a total scam. The USDA is subsidized by so many different vested interests within the food industry. The dairy is where I'd like to focus. This is from 2010. I'll bring it up. And by the way, we forgot to mention, 36% of Americans are classified as obese right now. That's a huge, huge problem. But listen to this from the USDA's Dietary Guidelines for Americans. This is a quote, and I'm particularly sensitive with dairy products because there's no evidence whatsoever that we need dairy products.
And you are lactose intolerant.
2/3 of the world is lactose intolerant, by the way, and we'll get into that. But listen to this quote. This is from the Dietary Guidelines for America. It is especially important to establish the habit of drinking milk in young children, as those who consume milk at an early age are more likely to do so as adults. I mean, that's criminal.
Those that take drugs at an early age are more likely to be predisposed to having a drug addiction.
And here's where I'm going to get crazy on you, and probably my listeners think I'm crazy, but this is akin to the cigarette industry. This is crazy. This is where the cigarettes try to hook people when they're young, and that's exactly what the USDA, the milk producers, or the dairy producers are trying to do here. They're trying to get kids hooked young, and I would even say that 50 years from now, our diets that we know now and have known for the last 50 years are going to be looked at like cigarettes are now.
Do you know we're the only mammal that drinks another mammal's milk as part of its dietary daily regimen?
We've been fed this crap for 100 years.
So listen, let me go back to something, though, because
go for it.
The definition of obesity is important. And I defended a little bit that Americans may be saving more than getting credit due to the statistics and some skewed statistics. Obesity is based on the famous National Institute of Health, the NIH, their body mass index, BMI, right? It's such a simplistic, stupid measurement. Do you know how BMI is calculated? I'll tell you how. Yeah. Don't answer that.
Okay.
You're basically taking your height and dividing it by your weight. Right. Now, they have some crazy calculation.
Over 30 is obese, right?
Right, but to get there, they're taking the height and they're converting it to meters, and then they're dividing it by the square of
the Pythagorean theorem.
Pythagorean theorem and the transitive property. But yes, they wanted to come out to even numbers. And normal weight is 18.5 to 24.9. Overweight's 25 to 29.9. And obese is 30 or greater. Guess what? And don't facetiously answer this. Am I obese?
I guess according to that, probably
No.
yeah.
No, that's just you and me sitting here. You know me. Am I obese?
No.
Thank you. Now, and I used to be a stud, right? I was
No,
six.
you never really. You thought you were, but you never really
I
were.
was 6'3", 220, 9% body fat, and that's how my wife met me. Sorry, wife. I had abs. Now, granted, I've
So
gained 20
you have
pounds.
false advertising to your wife?
It was a slow process. I ruptured 2 discs 2 years after meeting her, and then I gained 20 pounds. But the point is, I'm a large boned guy, fairly muscular from my old powerlifting days, but I'm not on load, right? But when you divide my height by my weight, my BMI comes out to 30. So the point is, I think there's a lot of people, it's too much of a general category. But
Right.
so maybe the obesity problem, it's still a problem, but maybe it's not as grandiose as we think. So, and I agree.
Well,
Listen, I'm not talking about people that have glandular problems and hormone distribution that creates weight and predisposed to extra fat tissue because both their parents were heavy or some type of molecular problem, or they could have diabetes, or maybe their metabolism is low. Listen, all those people may have a legitimate weight problem. But the point is, the majority of Americans, a third of us, have gained an extra 20, 30, 40, 50 plus pounds in the last 50 years.
And most people that, again, there's always going to be an exception, and maybe everyone thinks they're the exception, but most people don't have a hereditary problem of weight. They have a cultural inheritance of eating the wrong foods. And that's much more their problem than some disposition that they can't avoid being overweight. Or when I say overweight, obese. We'll focus this episode on obesity, which are the people that are, morbidly morbidly overweight and affecting their health in a serious way. And we can get into the health thing. I think everyone knows this, but heart disease, stroke, diabetes, lots of different cancers are exacerbated by being obese. Annually, you're going to spend
Exaggerated or exasperated?
exacerbated. That's a different word than both of those other two. Exacerbated.
I can't even spell that.
But annually, you're going to spend $2,000 more if you're obese in medical costs. There's huge money being made by treating obesity, which is, I think, $35 billion last year alone in cholesterol drugs, which, they don't even need them in other nations because they don't have a cholesterol problem. And it's all due to diet. And, that is, I shouldn't say all, it's primarily due to diet. I know you disagree with that.
Yeah, but let me ask you something. If you're scammed by the food industry, so for instance, we've had another polar dynamic in opposites where we are eating more food, but yet we're on more diets, right? So it's kind of an interesting contrast. But I think something like $20 billion is spent annually on diets. Here's the thing, right? When fat-free came out, it was, you don't want fat in your food. It's going to make you fat. So they replaced it with other things like trans fats that, or sugar,
right,
or fake sugars like sucralose, and it had the same effect.
Exactly.
Right? So, or even sugar itself. The irony with sugar is it's a fairly low caloric measurement substance, yet it spikes your insulin and it messes up your blood sugar, and it leads to all sorts of increased fat cells. So,
but here's where I would take it back to the whole cigarette analogy. Confusion is their friend, and this was documented in the cigarette era, where the cigarette executives sowed confusion so as to not have any theory that gained validity. And that's the same thing the food industry does. They try to confuse people with different studies that they pay for to try to sow confusion in the populace. And the bottom line is you got to eat fruits and whole vegetables. That's what you have to eat. And and light grains. That's what you have to eat to not be obese. If you eat processed food and meats and dairy products and sugars and fatty foods, you're going to be obese if you don't exercise. So that's the problem we have. It's an education problem, and it's there's lots of vested interests that are making billions of dollars to keep it that way.
So is it a manipulation problem or an ignorance problem? Because quite frankly, I even bought in. Here's a quick story. So I remember years ago, and I was at Mr. Workout, and I thought, okay, hey, I'll have a soft pretzel as a healthy snack. And it turns out now we know processed white flour and bread is if you have a slice of white bread, it's the equivalent of having like 3 tablespoons of sugar, the way it reacts in your blood sugar and then creates fat. We didn't know that, right? So nutrition information and beliefs change. A good buddy of mine I was living with at the time, Terry McGurk, 6'4", I'll use the word stud again, athlete, lacrosse player. He noticed I was keeping in shape, and he said, Kroller, hey, what are you doing? I said, Terry, I've got some new diet information. Tell me what you're doing. So he runs through it. I go, stop right there. What did you just say? He goes, well, as a healthy snack, I have probably 3 soft pretzels a day. I go, dude, cut those 3 soft pretzels out each day, trust me, and then tell me in 1 month what happened. He lost 10 pounds, and that's all he changed. So are we being manipulated, or is it our ignorance? We can only know so much as to what's put in front of us. Now, I agree the food pyramid.
There's no lobby for broccoli and spinach and beans. There's no lobbying for that.
I thought there was one for beans.
No, that's part of the problem is that's what you need to eat. And by the way, let me just, I'll fall on the sword here. I'm a healthy weight. I've been within 10 pounds of what I was in high school.
You have a slight build.
I have a slight build, and I'm a healthy weight. I walk 700 miles a year or more, right? But I fully acknowledge that I don't eat the proper foods all the time. So I don't know how healthy I am inside. I'm the proper weight, but I don't eat enough vegetables. I don't eat enough fruits, and I know about it because my family's very educated in this realm. But I'm not disciplined enough to eat rice, beans, whole, cut out the animal products, whole plant foods. I just don't eat enough of it, and I need to eat more of it. So.
But look how our society in America, agriculture and meat have changed. See, one of the interesting things to note is that 50, 60, 70 years ago, everything was organic, right? Even our meat was grass-fed. There were no pesticides. There were no hormones. There were no steroids. There were no antibiotics. And our milk was actually not bad for you. I think everything was more wholesome. Our soil was more plentiful with nutrients and vitamins. Now they churn the soil so much, even vegetables and fruits, you have to eat 10 times as much as you used to. So to have to get the same nutritional value. So I think our food in general is less nutritious, higher in fat, higher in other substances that clog our digestive systems and our metabolism. So this is more complicated than just simply ignorance.
I don't know. I think it's pretty simple. You eat small portions of whole plant foods, beans, fruits, vegetables. That's what you need to eat, the majority of your diet. And you need to exercise a little bit, and that's it. That if the Americans did that, obesity would be a fraction of the problem it is now. And if you go around the world, obesity isn't nearly the problem that we have. It's processed food, dairy, all the meats and animal products that we eat. That's the problem. And I have some recommendations for our listeners. There's a lot of good Netflix documentaries. If you have Netflix out there, Forks Over Knives, Sugar Coated, Food Inc., Cowspiracy, Vegucated, Eating You Alive is coming out shortly. So there's some places to get educated, and I'm encouraging you to learn. And I didn't come by this naturally. I married someone who's been a vegetarian for 25 years. My daughters are all vegetarians or vegans. My son is not yet. He's only 14. But I have good influences around me, and I'm not fully there yet. I think I eat the proper amount of food, and I exercise, but I don't eat the right foods all the time.
Well, I'll tell you one thing as far as ignorance goes. How much of our problems are passed down from our parents, and if you look at what's changed in society, right? There are, and I'm not just singling out mothers, but there are a lot of couples and moms and dads that are taking their kids to McDonald's. It's a convenience. It's easier than making a nice home-cooked meal with all the right things. There are mothers smoking and eating and drinking when they're pregnant. There's a much lower rate of breastfeeding nowadays because it's inconvenient, it's painful, and it's a pain in the neck. But that dramatically helps kids come out of the womb with a better body physiology and a less disposition to gaining weight. So there's also a lot of things that I think we've gotten lazy on as a society. We're passing down to our kids, and then some of these poor kids are coming out of the gate, behind the 8 ball. So the point is, Mark, can I call you Mark?
You can.
There's a lot of factors.
Mr. Weaver, I prefer.
Mr. Weaver, there's a lot of factors. I feel very sorry and sensitive to people that cannot control it. Pituitary gland or whatever is going bananas, and you just can't do anything about it. But yes, I think it's a discipline issue. I think we're getting lazy. We're not working out as much. We're not eating right. We're not being properly educated. We're being manipulated by the federal government and the USDA. And the food pyramid should be inverted, right? Turn that pyramid upside down. So it's everything.
Last thing on this topic before we move on. So how much of it is people not caring? Once they get to a certain stage in life, maybe, there's always a joke that, after people get married, they let themselves go. Do you think that, the motivation factor?
Absolutely. Listen,
it's hard. It's hard to deny yourself. Is that a big issue?
Motivation's a huge, huge piece of it. Think about it, right? Now that I'm getting a little more slovenly in my old age, if I'm going away to an island and I got to take my shirt off, or I'm going on a company trip, I don't want to be the big load who used to be a stud. So I tell you, I go at it extra hard and focus that, 4 to 8 weeks before, and I'll drop an extra 10 pounds. So I do believe motivation's helpful. They teach you that in working out, that you need to pick short-term gain motivations and stick to them. And I think, you know what? Unfortunately, a lot of married couples say, hey, you know what? I'm already married. I don't need to look as good as I used to meet a girl or meet a guy. And, you should try to stay in shape for your spouse, or I'm 50 or I'm 60 and who cares? We're not even having relations anymore. I think that's also a contributing factor.
I tell my kids when they're looking at their semester ahead in college, break it into little pieces. Don't think about the totality of the work you have to do to pass this class. Break it into just what do you have to do today to be ahead of the professor. And I think that's the same with dieting and discipline with working out or what have you, or eating the right things. Just focus on the present. Don't think about, wow, I got to lose 40 pounds. Think about, I have to do the right activity day in and day out, and the rest will take care of itself.
Hey, all you got to do is walk through a movie theater, an airport, or a train station, and you go, oh my gosh, we got to stop eating cheeseburgers.
And by the way, some people say, well, I can't, I have a bad knee, I can't work out, a bad ankle, I can't work out. I have a bad knee, I have a ruptured Achilles in the past, I have shoulders that are falling apart.
And your face is killing me.
My face is killing everyone. But I walk. That's all I can do now. And I walk a lot. I walk a couple miles a day. And everyone can walk, pretty much. I mean, obviously, if you're in a wheelchair or crippled or something like that, I guess you're not supposed to say that anymore. Disabled, you can't walk. But a lot of people...
That's a microaggressionist comment you just made.
Most people can walk. Just make the time. Prioritize. People say, I don't have the time to do it. Well, yes, you do. You're choosing not to do it. Make the time to walk every day.
Mark Weaver, walk tall and carry a big stick.
I'm the Bryn Mawr walker. All right, so we're going to move on to our final segment, When We Were Idiots. And Rich has a compelling story for us.
A lot of my idiot stories are due to inexperience and actually trying to do the right thing. But this one's very memorable. So a good buddy of mine who's going to be in a lot of my stories, Paul Frenchie, big Canadian lummox. He was with me a lot of these incidents.
And everyone likes Frenchie.
Lovable guy, right? So we bought a rental property, our very first rental property. Not that I have a lot of rental properties, but it was my first foray into rental properties, mid-20s. We buy this row home in Manayunk, up-and-coming city, and we think, okay, we're going to be smart. We'll buy something in here, and 10 years later, we'll make a lot of money. That never happened. But we decided to try to rehab the house ourselves with zero experience. I mean, I don't know anything about drywall or plumbing or electricity, but we said, you know what? We're smart guys. We can do this ourselves. So we had a couple tenants. Coach Dave Evans from Canada was living there. He was coaching the Philadelphia Wings at the time. Goalie Dwight Metke from Canada was the goalie for the Philadelphia Wings. He was living there at the time.
You're a name dropper.
I love the name drop. Frenchie was actually played for the Wings, but previously, so that's how he got these guys to stay in our house. Really nice guys.
Another guy, Barack Obama. Remember that guy? He was part of that, wasn't that a crew?
He texted me earlier today in case you wanted to know. So these guys are staying at the house, and their washing room froze. So we had a washer, dryer in the back room, wasn't well insulated, and the washing machine froze. So we had to fix it. We had to insulate the room, so we decided to do it ourselves. Now, meanwhile, Paul's sister-in-law was farming out some small jobs to a high school kid named DJ. Really handy kid. He knew way more than we did. $5 an hour was worth it. So me, Frenchie, and DJ go to insulate the washroom. So we did a good job on the inside, and we actually figured out drywall, and we insulated it. But we needed something on the outside of this room in the bottom. It was kind of an exposed room. So we're out there freezing cold, and we're putting up plywood, and we're putting up insulation, and we got the whole thing done. We're a foot away from completing a great project, and we come across this stinking lead-looking rusted pipe that's in our way to finish the job. So we try everything to slide this plywood underneath it. Nothing will work. We would cut different angles. Nothing will work. So Frenchie's like, well, we should bend this down a little bit. And I agreed. If we bend it down just a little bit, we'll fit this piece of wood in there.
And you guys are both big guys, probably able to do it.
Yeah, we're both at the time, weighing about 230. And
body mass index of 26. Not obese.
Right before we became obese, years later. And so Paul starts pulling on it. This is old school iron cast lead or whatever it is. I get on there. I start pulling on it. He then goes to hang on it like a pull-up. I then go to hang on it like a pull-up. So we got 460 pounds, and the thing snaps. And we look at each other, and it snaps perfectly right at the wall. We're like, we
couldn't go any better.
Couldn't go any better. We didn't need a hacksaw. And then all of a sudden we hear... And we look at each other like, what's that sound? And then DJ goes, I think you just cut a live gas line. And then we start smelling it.
So you lit a cigarette?
So we started a little brush fire. So Paul goes, this is a problem. I said, I agree. I go, listen, run downstairs, try to find the gas, the main valve, turn it off. I'll go upstairs and call Pico. And before we do that, because Paul is going to go his way and I'm going to go my way, DJ, put your finger in the pipe because we couldn't figure out how to.
Did Ty Pennington teach you this? Or Bob Vila?
We got DJ put his finger in the exposed pipe and we taped all around his finger with duct tape and we said, don't go anywhere. Goodness. And he looks at us like, are you serious?
Oh, my God.
I go, yeah, we'll be 5 minutes, but this is the best way to do it. So Paul goes to try to find the gas valve. I call Pico, and the first thing Pico says is, oh, my gosh. We just had an entire city block blow up in South Philly. Whatever you do, don't walk across a rug and call me. And I look down. There's 25 feet of rug I just walked across. He's like, get out of the house, evacuate everybody in the house. How long has this been going on? We said, a couple minutes, and we have no way to stop it. We can't. Paul runs up. He couldn't find the gas valve. So, oh, my gosh, Armageddon. Police officers. SWAT teams, hazmat units, the USDA. We had guys in black hats and black suits show up. They evacuated the whole block. And the funny part of the story was Dwight Metke's girlfriend, this actress from England, was in town staying with him. So he'd evacuate her.
Oh, my goodness.
The whole neighborhood's looking at us. And then the Pico team and all the cops pull up and they see DJ standing there with his finger taped to the pipe. And we walk down, and about 15 guys look at us in helmets and rifles, and they said, seriously, guys, this was your answer? So
it's fair to say you're not going to be called by HGTV anytime soon to do a home improvement show?
I am not doing any flip it and fix it, fixer-upper shows anytime soon.
Oh, my goodness. Great story. Oh, my God. I can't even imagine the look on the police and everyone's face. That's crazy. Okay, so good show, and we're going to be talking next show about immigration. And immigration is both legal and illegal, and it's been in the news a lot over the last year and a half or so. So we're going to talk about that. And I'd like to remind our listeners to tune in for that one. Also, I'd like to remind you to share us on Facebook. We talked about that last week. Whatever you're able to do, pick your favorite episode, click down to the bottom of the episode, share, click it on Facebook. And if you do that, we'd really appreciate it. As we play out, I thought the song Too Heavy would be appropriate again, since we talked about obesity today. And remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.